I'm 32 years old, and I'm an aunt before anything else. My niece is 15, and since she was little, she would come to my place to eat popcorn and watch old movies. She asked me things she didn't dare ask at home, and I always told her she could talk to me about anything, that I wouldn't judge her. One Tuesday, she called me with a voice as thin as threads and said she needed to see me without her mom. She arrived with her sweatshirt inside out, chewed sleeves, and red eyes. I made tea, even though it was hot. She sat on the edge of the couch like the floor was burning, looked straight at me, and blurted it out. She was pregnant. I didn't scream. I didn't say how. I held her cold, sticky hands and saw the test in a little zip bag. 2 lines, clear, pink, and cruel. I asked if she was sure. She said she had taken 2 tests. Then she asked me not to hate her. I hugged her and told her nothing in the world could make me hate her. I suggested we go to the doctor. She nodded. I asked about her mom. She doesn't know. If she finds out, she'll kill me, she whispered. We left immediately. In the hallway, my knees shook. I pressed my forehead to the door so I wouldn't faint. Not out of shame or fear of gossip, but out of a thick, metallic tasting fear. At the clinic, the nurse spoke in a low voice, as if words could shatter. They confirmed the pregnancy. 12 weeks. My niece squeezed my hand until it went numb. The doctor asked about the father. My niece shrugged, stared at the floor, and said it was someone from the neighborhood. I asked if he was her age. She shook her head. I said the word adult with a dry mouth. The nurse stopped writing. I don't want trouble, my niece said. You didn't start the trouble, I answered as calmly as I could. You're a child. We drove back in silence. At a stoplight, without looking at me, she said he gave her gifts, helped with homework, told her she was mature, and said that if she told anyone, no one would believe her. I wanted to pull over and scream. Instead, I counted to 50 and gripped the steering wheel until my hands hurt. When I dropped her off, I promised not to tell her mom today, but I made it clear this wouldn't stay as it was. That night, I started gathering evidence. I texted her, don't delete anything, take screenshots, and email them to me. They began to arrive. Double-meaning jokes, audio messages with a man's voice pretending to sound young, photos of her hand holding a mug in a kitchen with green tiles I recognized, because there's only one kitchen like that on our block. The one across the street, the neighbors. A guy in his late 30s, always ironed, with a catalog smile. My stomach turned to stone. I opened a notebook, wrote his name in big letters, and underneath the word evidence, I made a list. Screenshots, audios, times, witnesses, places. I called a lawyer friend. She told me 3 things in a firm voice. Don't confront him. File a report and take your niece for specialized care. I went to see my sister the next day. I should have brought flowers or cake to soften the blow. I showed up with my face. I said, we need to talk. And she was already angry. I went first and blurted, your daughter is pregnant. The spoon fell from her hand. She asked what I had told the girl, as if I had caused it. She started to cry, then fury flared. She blamed me for talking to her daughter about birth control, about studying away from home, about freedom, about having a voice. She said I made her rebellious. She called me a brainwasher. My ears burned, but I didn't respond. I asked her not to take it out on the girl. Who's the father? She asked, voice broken. A neighbor. How old? Late 30s. Her face changed. Not to disbelief, to rage. The kind that clenches teeth before it roars. She said she would go kill him. I took her by the arm. Not with your fists, I said. We do this by reporting, and with care. She yelled that she was the mother and I, the one who claimed to protect, had failed to protect. I swallowed the insult I had ready. I spoke to her like when we were little, and had to blow the ants off the sugar line. Don't fight me. Fight. What they did to your daughter. We went to pick up my niece from school. The principal lent us her office. There were tissues and water. The girl told what she could. She said she didn't want trouble. I explained in short words that the problem was him. that an adult abused her trust, that is a crime. The principal was clear and offered the school counselor. After that, we went for specialized medical care. We left with a packet of papers, hotline numbers, instructions. I kept it all as if it were diamonds. At the corner we ran into him. Checkered shirt, bag of bread, cheap cologne. He smiled, teeth gleaming. Good afternoon. I didn't answer. My niece lowered her gaze. My sister looked at him with knife eyes. As soon as we turned the corner, my sister said she would devour him. I repeated that fists weren't the way. That night he called her. I told her not to answer. Don't make a scene. I'll buy you whatever you want. Your aunt is putting ideas in your head. If you go to the police, I'll say you lied about your age. No one believes you. I saved all the screenshots. I texted my niece. I love you. You're not alone. We filed a report the next day. The officer spoke with the weariness of someone who has seen this too many times, and the firmness of someone who refuses to get used to it. We requested a restraining order. I asked about school protocols. I called the counselor. In a single day, I became that aunt who knows every procedure, fueled by nothing but love and anger. The family split. Some said, poor girl. Others said, poor man, they're ruining his life. An aunt said, that's what happens when you let girls go out. He is an adult, I repeated to everyone. She is 15. Poor man was answered with, poor soul, if you protect the one who harms. In the middle of the noise, my niece slept with the light on, and her backpack at her feet. I bought her a lamp shaped like a moon. She turned it on to scare the shadows. He knocked on the door with cookies and a pressed shirt. I came to clear things up, he said softly, as if it were all a misunderstanding. Whatever you have to say it through your lawyer, I replied. You're exaggerating. She came on to me. She's 15. Leave. You're going to lose friends, he hinted. I'd rather lose friends than lose my dignity. I closed the door. I notified the police about the contact. That afternoon, while I washed cups, my sister said without looking at me, sorry for blaming you. I blame myself too for not seeing it, I replied. Do you think my daughter is broken? No, she's scared. What breaks can be mended, and if it can't, we hold her anyway. Days went by, long and stretched like plastic. I worked with my mind somewhere else. I made lists of appointments, medications, tasks. I prepared a notebook for my niece with emergency numbers and pages for drawing. One Sunday at a family meal, someone blurted that, this will stain the family forever. I washed my plate and no one dared speak. The investigation moved more slowly than my anger. Sometimes my sister wanted to stop everything. Sometimes she wanted to burn the block down. I was the pendulum. One day when I picked up my niece, I saw her laugh with a friend. That small laugh was a miracle. When we turned the corner, he was leaning on his car. No one believes you, he said under his breath. I took a photo with time and location. I'm scared, my niece said. I know. I don't know when this ends, but we are not going to end, I told her. We were called to expand the statement. They took my niece to a room with crayons. She came out pale, head held high. Days later, they notified us of precautionary measures. He couldn't come near. I kept that paper like a key. Even so, I changed routes, organized rounds with the neighbor, women, and we made a code word for asking for help. My niece stuck a note on her mirror. It wasn't my fault. I cried in the kitchen with the water running to hide the sound. My sister apologized again. Hating me was easier than hating him, or hating herself for not seeing it. We hugged with stiff shoulders. Therapy started loosening words. My niece said he kept repeating, you're special, you can handle this. And those phrases were like gum, tangled. I told her she was special, but because of who she was, not for carrying someone else's trash. And that we'd peel off the gum one by one without ripping hair. She finally laughed at my metaphor. First hard twist. The neighbor's wife. Yes, he had a wife. She came to the door with smeared makeup and a folder of receipts. She said he was a good person, that he helped at church, that we shouldn't destroy families. She brought their wedding photo. I asked her to sit. I offered water. I told her I understood her pain. But a crime is a crime. She stood up in anger and said I was a jealous woman who wanted to steal her husband. I laughed to keep from crying. I walked her to the door. She came back at night, alone, no makeup, with a black eye. She brought a USB drive and told me in a low voice. There were things I needed to see. There were chats with other teenage girls. Photos of repeated gifs. The same phrases, the same stickers, the same pattern. She said if she talked, her family would throw her out onto the street. That I hadn't known her like this, but that she knew her husband, older than the wedding portrait. I hugged her. I called the lawyer. That evidence changed things. Second twist. A neighborhood cop, some cousin of someone's cousin, quietly told me to be careful. That the neighbor had friends in the ministry and would try to shut the matter down. I wrote down his name. I gave it to the lawyer. She documented everything. I learned that justice is also defended with little papers, signatures, and stamps. Third twist. They hacked the email where I stored the screenshots. Luckily, I had already made copies on 2 flash drives and on an offline hard drive. I realized it because I got an email from me, to me, insulting me. I took a deep breath, changed passwords, printed the important stuff again, and stored it at a trustworthy neighbor's house. Fourth twist. The school. A mother from the parent committee said, my niece was a bad influence. She proposed that, for the health of the group, my niece skipped the field trip. I felt myself boil. The principal, who had been proper, stood up and said the trip was for everyone, and that anyone who had a problem could simply not go. The next day, I sent her flowers with a note that said, thank you for not letting go of the rope. Fifth twist. Church. The pastor called us to dialogue, so as to not destroy families. I told him we'd talk when he spoke from the pulpit about abuse and responsibility. The following Sunday at Mass, he dedicated his homily to protecting the little ones. He didn't say names, but he said what needed to be said. Several older women left with wet eyes. One of them stopped me on the way to the market and whispered that her daughter was 16 and scared. I gave her my number. Days later, she arrived with her own folder. He had written to her too. Sixth twist. He violated the restraining order. He planted himself on the corner by the school, pretending to talk on the phone. My niece saw him and her body short-circuited. I called the police with a calm voice I didn't feel inside. They took a while, but they came. He walked away quickly. He never ran, so he wouldn't look guilty. A store camera caught him at the edge of the frame. The owner gave me the video, because his daughter studied there too. That night we slept, with a chair bracing the door and the neighbor's dog in the living room. I stayed awake watching shadows on the wall. I told myself we had measures in place, that I wasn't alone, that fear doesn't get to be in charge. Still, at 3 in the morning I went to the kitchen, drank water, and reread the papers once more, as if they were a blanket. Seventh twist. The most unexpected that month. My own brother, my niece's uncle, came up to me and said in a low voice that when he was 12, a neighborhood coach did things to him he never told anyone. He told me, not our mother, not his wife. He told me looking at the floor. He cried like a child. He asked forgiveness for not having believed our niece right away. For having said, what a shame. He hugged me clumsily. He said that if he had to give a statement, he would talk about his old case, even if the abuser no longer lived there. Violence tangles in families like old wires behind a cabinet, I thought. When you touch one, the others come loose. Eighth twist. A local journalist approached politely and said he wanted to tell stories of courage. I told him no, not yet, that it was risky. He insisted tactfully. I told him any article had to protect the girl. A week later, an anonymous piece appeared about a grooming case in the neighborhood, with correct data and no names. People began to change the tone of their whispers. Ninth, and painful. At a medical check, They told us there was a risk of complications. I won't describe more. I'll only say we spent many hours in a cold hallway, smelling of bleach and fear. My niece squeezed my hand, and I counted tiles so I wouldn't fall apart. Some days the body enters the story, like a door closing. That day, I understood it wasn't enough to collect evidence. I also had to breathe in someone else's rhythm, so she wouldn't dissolve. 10th twist. Tiny but huge for us. My niece, on a random Thursday, asked to make popcorn. She said she wanted to watch an old movie, one of those with silly endings. We made them. They burned a little. We laughed. For an hour, life was a full bowl, and a TV. I knew that hour was worth more than all the papers. And at the end, when we turned off the TV, she turned to me and said, "Aunt, I want us to fight this to the end, even if it hurts." I said yes. I told her I was her shield and her ladder. That if one day she couldn't stand up, I would carry her. She kissed my cheek. I went to the bathroom to cry softly. I looked in the mirror and saw a different face. Firmer. 11th twist. Straight out of a movie. Someone slipped a sealed envelope under my door. Inside was an unsigned letter from a girl in the neighborhood, saying that when she was 14, he took her to the corner store to buy juice, and ended up touching her. She wrote she never told, because they blamed her for wearing a skirt. The letter got stained with my tears. I wrote a reply and taped it in the same place, with no names, just, "Thank you," and a lawyer's number. 12th. His wife left home for a few days. I don't know how, but she came back. She sent me a voice note in the early morning, crying, saying she felt sick for having defended him. I listened with as much compassion as I could gather. I didn't judge her. I can't ask perfect courage of someone living inside imperfect fear. There was another hacking attempt. There was a rumor at the market that I wanted money. A neighbor told me to tone it down. An older lady hugged me without knowing me. There were sleepless nights. There was a warm sun morning when my niece stuck a moon made of stickers beside her bed and told me the light made her feel accompanied. We made a plan then. Lawyer, counselor, principal, friends, neighbor women. We drew up a list of who calls whom, if what happens. We wrote names and times. We put ice cream in the freezer to have something good at the end of bad days. There was a lot, so much, patience. And when it seemed the rope would snap, the call came. Date for the preliminary hearing. I felt relief and fear braided together. My niece asked if that meant it would all be over. I told her the truth. No, but it's a step. She asked me to buy her a new notebook, to write victories. We went to the store. She chose one with a starry cover. The first victory, she wrote herself, is that we spoke. I added, another, smaller, and that they didn't silence us. I stored that notebook with the same reverence I give the legal papers. Because victories are words too. The week of the hearing, the neighborhood felt like a silent chessboard. He stopped standing on the corner, but his car still moved at odd hours. The police did patrols that didn't always arrive when we needed them. So we tightened our network of neighbor women. One of them, the lady who runs the little store, showed us a notebook where she had started writing down times, plates, who passed, and who didn't. She said she used to write IOUs. Now she wrote shadows. I brought her bread and said thank you. That week my niece had nightmares. She talked in her sleep. She said, "Don't say." I sat on the edge of her bed and told her, even if she couldn't hear me, I'll speak. For you. A new twist. The coach of the local team, his friend, began posting passive-aggressive lines on Facebook about false accusations and people seeking attention. Several people applauded. The school principal sent out a memo asking for respect and reminding everyone of the protocols. I printed the memo and stuck it to the fridge with a watermelon magnet. My sister said her legs were shaking, but that she felt less alone seeing papers that backed her up. We called the lawyer. She prepared us for the hearing. Timing. Who speaks first? How to sit. What to bring. We rehearsed everything as if it were a play. We practiced deep breaths before each sentence. We practiced saying, "I don't recall," instead of making things up. We practiced not looking at him, so his face wouldn't rattle us. The day came. The courthouse hallway smelled like old coffee and new fear. People cried on metal chairs. Others laughed too loudly. The lawyer found us and gave us a "I'm here" gesture. He arrived in a suit and an exhausted, rehearsed smile. His wife wasn't there. A man who seemed to be his lawyer hovered around him like someone calming a nervous dog. My niece squeezed my hand. The hearing was long and technical, so I won't tell it all. I'll say the judge listened, that our lawyer was clear, that he lied with ease, that he said, "She came on to me," and that our lawyer cut through with a simple sentence. "She is 15. I'll say there was a moment when my niece, with a low but firm voice, said her name and her age, and that she wanted to be safe. I looked at the floor so I wouldn't cry and soak the papers. When we came out, we breathed as if someone had taken a backpack off us, but our backs still hurt. Outside, his wife was waiting, not to fight, but to look at us. She said she was going to speak. She said she was tired of lying and covering up. She handed me a notebook with dates and places. I couldn't hug her there, but in my head I did. I told her that if she needed a shelter, I knew one. She nodded. We exchanged numbers again, with a different look this time. Hard twist. That night they smashed my car window. They didn't take anything. They just left a note inside that said, "Enough." I called the police, filed a report, took photos of everything, while I vacuumed the little bits of glass. I thought there are people who don't know how to do anything but break glass to ask for silence. I, on the other hand, don't know anything except collecting the pieces and moving on. My niece had a panic attack the next day. She couldn't breathe. She thought she was dying. I hugged her and counted out loud, 1, 2, 3. The counselor had taught me a trick with cold water and box breathing. It worked, little by little. Afterward, she told me she was ashamed for having failed. I told her she hadn't failed, that her body was just trying to vent smoke somewhere. I told her it happens to me when I walk down streets that are too quiet. I thought you were strong, she said. I am strong, and I'm afraid, I answered. All of that is allowed at once. Another twist that shifted the ground. A 17-year-old boy from the neighborhood team sought me out in secret. He said the coach was asking him for photos to assess muscles. He said he didn't know if telling was betrayal. I told him telling wasn't betrayal. It was self-defense. He gave me his testimony in writing. I called the lawyer. Abuse networks are sometimes crossbeams, holding up entire roofs. It's not enough to pull a nail. You have to lower piles of rotten timber. It hurt. But we did it step by step. One Sunday, my niece wanted to talk out loud with her mother about whether she wanted to continue the pregnancy or not. I won't reveal her final decision. I'll just say the conversation was honest, careful, with the counselor present, and that all three of us cried. To decide is a heavy verb, but it's also a verb that gives the decider their name back. Whatever path she chooses, my niece will not walk it alone again. That night, when my sister fell asleep on the couch, with her mouth slightly open from exhaustion, I covered her feet with a blanket. On her forehead, I saw the girl she had been, and at the same time the mother she is learning to become. I kissed her without waking her. The neighborhood's landscape changed suddenly. An anonymous banner appeared on the park fence, with the phrase, "Not with our children." I don't know who made it. I do know many people stopped to look at it. They took it down quickly, but it was enough to move something. At the store, an older woman told me she had erased all the teen girl jokes from her gatherings. No one is spared from re-educating themselves, I thought. Not even me, who thought I was ready for everything, and discovered that fear makes me clumsy, that anger makes me say things that hurt those I'm trying to protect. Then came a breath of air twist. The school organized a consent workshop for parents and students. I went and sat in the back. There were simple phrases, clear examples, trembly hands asking questions. A dad said it was uncomfortable to talk about that with his kids. The counselor said it would be more uncomfortable not to, and regret it later. A first grader raised his hand to ask what to do if an adult plays in a bad way with him. I heard him, and my knees loosened, but my heart tightened with gratitude. There were questions, and now there would be places to put the answers. The second hearing took a while. In the meantime, he tried to manipulate two witnesses in his favor by telling them my niece flirted with him. One of those witnesses, a woman who sells tamales, told us crying. She said he had promised to fix her boiler in exchange for a favor. We gave her coffee and respect. We told her no one has to pay for hot water with silence. She gave her statement. There was more muffled laughter in the neighborhood, but there were also hands stacking up into a wall. One night, my mother, my niece's grandmother, arrived with a square tin box where she keeps old letters. She pulled out one in which she asked our forgiveness for not knowing how to talk about certain things when we were girls, for being afraid to name the things that scared us. Now I know how to say abuse, she said just above a whisper, and I know how to place guilt where it belongs, and innocence where it belongs too. She hugged us both. There was no music, just her breathing, and mine, and my niece's, sinking for a moment, like some secret metronome guided them. The second hearing brought a hard twist. His wife testified. Not everything, but enough. She said she had found repeated gifts, had seen messages, had heard the phrases. She said she was scared. She said he had isolated her from her family. She said, I have a daughter and I don't want her to grow up with this poison. The judge listened. Our lawyer clenched her pen. I didn't blink, so I wouldn't miss a single word. As we left, the wife looked at me and said, thank you. I told her no, thank you. I looked at her the way you look at a crack where light comes in. He, for his part, tried to present himself as an exemplary neighborhood volunteer. He brought photos serving food at an event and handing out blankets. The lawyer, bless her, asked the judge to focus on facts and ages. The judge did. There's no blanket that can cover a date of birth. Dark twist. Outside, two men we'd never seen in the neighborhood were waiting. They didn't say anything. They just watched with neutral faces. We got in the car and took a different route. We notified the police. The lawyer talked about additional measures. I thought the traffic light takes an eternity when you want to cross quickly. My niece, in the back seat, quietly sang a ridiculous song we learned when she was little, as if to keep the silence of those men from coming in. As weeks passed, my niece's victories notebook began to fill with small, enormous things. Today I slept 6 hours. Today I told I didn't want hugs, and they respected it. Today I didn't cry on the bus. Today I wore the blue blouse without feeling watched. I wrote beside them in my cramped handwriting. Today I didn't check the door 3 times, only twice. Today I called my sister, and we didn't fight. Today I went to work and managed to focus 3 hours in a row. They seem silly until you run out of air. Then every minute of normal is a trophy. One day he was briefly detained for violating the order. Not on our street, somewhere else. They notified us. I didn't celebrate. I've learned that in this, there are no fireworks. There's a slow sum of locks clicking shut, of doors that don't open, of routes that get used to another way of walking. Even so, that night we slept a little better. Not completely, but better. The unexpected hit came. A distant cousin of ours shared in a WhatsApp group a message calling me a troublemaker and my niece a liar. He said it was all made up by this snowflake generation. My sister gripped her phone like she might break it. I took a deep breath and said out loud, "We're not going to burn fuel arguing with someone who doesn't want to understand." 10 minutes later, another cousin replied to him, "I do believe them. And if you don't like it, leave the chat." I didn't think she'd write that. My heart was surprised. One random afternoon, while standing in line at the bakery, a boy around 9 asked if I was the aunt who helps. I said yes. He told me his cousin didn't want to go to a neighbor's house because he pinches him. I knelt to his height and told him he did right by telling me. I asked him to tell his mom. He promised he would. I don't know if he did. I want to believe he did. I want to believe putting words in a child's mouth is like handing them a key. The third hearing came. More papers, more lines, less patience in the body, more firmness in the voice. The counselor testified. The lawyer wove an argument like a tablecloth. I recognized the feeling of sitting on a metal chair with cold feet and a burning chest. My niece, during a recess, asked me if all this would make us bad people. I told her no, that it had changed us, yes, but that what defines us is how we use that change. To hold hands or to hand out blows. I choose the hand, she said. He tried one last move. He presented a supposed letter from my niece, asking him for forgiveness. It was fake. The lawyer already had a typography and metadata expert report. It collapsed in minutes. Sometimes a house of cards stands for weeks, and sometimes one well-aimed breath knocks it down. This was the latter. I felt relief in my back, like someone lifted a river stone I had carried too long. I won't state the final result of the process, because, even though I'm telling my part here, this is my niece's life, and I respect her timing. I'll say that justice is slow, and walking with it hurts, but joining hands lightens the load. I'll say the neighborhood grew a little less blind. I'll say my sister and I speak differently now. Fewer shouts, more pauses. I'll say the pastor called one night to tell us they were opening a support group for families, and that, if we wanted, we could help name things. I'll say the principal hung a sign with hotline numbers at the school entrance that hadn't been there before. I'll say his wife is living with her sister, and that, little by little, she has learned to breathe without asking permission. I'll say, above all, that my niece started writing in another notebook. She titled it, Things I Want to Do When I'm Not Afraid. The first page says, ride my bike to the park without looking back, eat mangoes with chili, and cry only because it's spicy. Dance in the living room again, learn to install a lamp by myself, call a friend who also needs to be believed, tell myself it wasn't my fault, and truly believe it. The last line, in sparkly ink, she dedicated to me. And hug my aunt when I'm no longer afraid. My bones will break from the inside. I made my own list. I wrote, learn to forgive myself for not seeing it sooner. Stand firm even when my hands shake. Defend even when it means swallowing my pride. Rest without guilt. Celebrate every Sunday we aren't chased by a shadow. Make perfect popcorn at least once. On that list, I added the hardest. Don't let hate take my tenderness. Because without tenderness, I turn to stone. And stones don't know how to hug. And what we've needed most in these months is to hug without breaking. The last twist I'll share here made no noise. My niece asked me to move her bedroom lamp and put it somewhere else. She said she didn't want it by the door anymore. She wanted it on the nightstand. Like the light comes from inside, not outside. I moved it. When I turned off the other one, the room settled into a calm brightness. Not like a hospital, not like an interrogation, not like a fire. She lay down, asked me to read something silly. I read. She fell asleep with her mouth slightly open, like when she was a baby. I sat on the floor and breathed. Outside, the neighborhood sounded like dishes, dogs, televisions, life. Inside, finally, it sounded like rest. I don't know if this is the end, but I know it's a new edge from which we're looking at things. I know some wounds take time, and that there will be bad days. I also know there's a net that didn't exist before, made of women who believe each other, and men who dare to say, I suffered too, or I protected too, who no longer want to be spectators. I know that if the fears return, we'll rebuild the plan. Papers, phone calls, patrols, ice cream at the end of the day, old movies, popcorn slightly burned. I know above all that girls are to be believed, cared for, and defended. Even if the neighborhood whispers, even if the family splits, even if our voices tremble. And when the voice trembles, it isn't about to break, it's pushing on walls, and pushing on walls, however tiring, eventually opens windows. Through those windows, now comes a light, my niece says, feels different. It's not a light that, looks to see if someone is coming. It's a light that says, I'm here. That, at last, is our light. And in that light, we all fit. And to that light, whatever happens, we will return.